Hello, the species value nature system. Hello, the Legion. Hear your name. Patrol. Campus. Call lost and found. We lost the name. Full train. North Korea is as America. See, our infrastructure is recorded criminally foreign influenced. I'm not a lawyer, not a police form, not a criminal. Expert on the nature of English grammar, which is a value shared by the predicate in the predicate act. The predicate is positive, also positive. Relationship to itself, inherently, actively, progressively at the same time. The predicate act is positive's negative relationship to itself, inherently, actively, and progressively at the same time as our identity, as positive. As positive is a temporary body of value, per what the two parts of the body of a battery can make the spark into a body of value that is further positive or negative in relationship to what is either positive to overall, right to left, and left to right at the same time, and with and as active bodies of value. Three plus symbols inside the parentheses here of the ancient snow people, because this is why with ratiocination looks like. This is also the value that is both the value of ratiocination and of pseudo-ratiocination. We have in modern times, in colonial times, in the early states times, recorded criminally foreign influence per internation facilitated in America since before our founders' births. Internation for a fact treatment racket, keeping it blamed on all other, keeping the concept of colonization with all those crazy laws, not just against black people. They had laws against speech, not just against speech, about forced, in other words, they were treating what people were saying. If you were found out, no matter what color you were, you're a fact treatment nature slave. And they did the torture, and then even with the drama with it now, too, totally off. Because it's not taking the organized crime method to it. In other words, a whole bunch of predicate acts are a part of slavery, like extortion, facilitated by internation, organized crime, interstate organized crime. They didn't have a state colony, it's a state. States of a nation, per nature system, per the identity of value, and per the identity of value of unto itself, of the identity of value that is coming through temporary space nature, which is a semi-nature of the complete identity of space, which is greater than it, as our identities are in demonstration of this, as measured, and to extents that are debatable, but offensively being debated when people are trying to express the extents that aren't in everyday life. We have fact treatment nature tactically degraded to each area of each modern nation. And no one understands it because each modern nation was forced to share policing as a fake identity. So to keep that hidden in relationship to the market's position shared, forced on each nation from a tactically denatured relationship to nature as fact treatment nature. So when they contemplate Native American rights in the back of your mind, and juxtaposed with it is other people stacking, criminally foreign influence, because that was set up tactically. They did denatured Native American landscape before that's how they divided them. Our nature is a system that doesn't want to be divided. It demonstrates because it pushes it away from here. The ancients knew how to cause evolution, which uses the real. It's for Native Americans are trying to gather their might to claim their dream awoke to have the streams to have the real evolution working not with concrete, with box means and narratives, with suit and tie that are pseudoscience, incapable of even sustaining defense of their own fact treatments, even as trained as victim predators. Everyone don't think till you get to this age. Then you're in collusion with it because you're told by the age already still originally stayed criminally foreign influenced. That's why the nations are together. So they're fighting each other, blaming on what is fluent through our nations needing that. It's to the maintenance of that with terrorism. Because it's the maintenance of naive reactions that don't know how to counter. But also already stay invested roles with database brackets, with breach precedents, with courts databases, with prisons databases, with school databases, campus databases. Everyone victim predator. Per investigations through what is exploiting how we have so many police forms of our own, juxtaposed with and as training, worse than training, because everyone's a victim predator of criminally foreign influenced sciences. Native American history is about how our founders wanted us to tell, about how they were forced to speech and to theater, nature of criminal seriousness, nature that was short-term and long-term, still had to hide their roles with the Constitutional Convention. In other words, they had to use the breaching employed what they wanted told, multi-front fake sides. This is still happening today through each age of fact treatment nature. Original state progressed, lab progression cover-up natures, victim predators, reactions to it, then they already get invested that way. But a breaching organized crime, keeping each nation like this. In other words, incapable of speaking for it as stability. In other words, it's necessary to always remind our leaders, but not personally, that. But I mean, that's Mr. Biden's right because it's crazy. The bombs and the progressions of stability that never was with that kind of, in other words, those kind of reactions to means that aren't even means in the first place. They're not working with science. That didn't leave people stacking. That doesn't need to, there's so much space. It's not even, in other words, in means, these are divided means. There's not a free market anywhere in the world because each modern nation was forced to this. Because as pseudo-sophistication. Only sophistication in relationship to, worse than not free, which is what Hartford is, distinctly and together. For example, with every other cellular part of the trinity of our connection as a nature, as area, states, and nations value. And then with other nations. So we can see what is beyond our control. And even if we can control that and connect it, it's still negative value nature progressions. Still going to cause negative value nature progressions in acts and natures, like criminal insidiousness natures, like predicate acts, facilitated by criminal enterprises, which were like, so that's by nature. Because think about that, you're an internation criminal enterprise. Now nations are legalized criminal enterprises because they're victim predators of originally and stayed criminally foreign influenced areas maintained, now online maintained, motivated. Evidence hacks, knaves, database crime predators, indifference natures to it raised to what can't, it stays incapable of countering what comes through our investigators through how they were our force shared police. You can't hide that and tell our American history. Because that's what James Madison is all about. Marbury versus Madison. Free speech. They're not letting it because they're going for markets positions. and then they're justifying that, so they're not letting equality of fact, treatment, in nature offensively against people in every science, any science, against fact, treatment, nature of any age. They're building criminal insidiousness nature. Suit and ties and counters to the suit and tie, all not understanding, because international science is fluent through our nations. It preys on, it cultivates difference the same way it cultivates pseudo unity, predatory unity, used for fact treatment rackets. Black and white with the law was one of many laws to keep the fact treatment nature for a long term, beat down, breached roles. They needed to cover up lie progressions engineered from a base propagated sect like that for this, worse than witch trials with the law. See, we need to counter the organized crime. We have to treat colonization with a greater organized crime method to it, which is why the Alpha and the Omega and Jesus Christ is about the alphabet, about the sabotage of the Campus Martius before the time of modern messengers. That's why the beginning of the Quran is about how they're forced to agreements with liars, who as criminal insidiousness nature, liars. In other words, shared every area of every nation, every state of every nation, to agreements and natures of business with a value nature system that is tactically ulterior from truths, which is pure native sequence nature. So, and its relationship to itself. So we could see it is the shared value of the predicate and of the predicate act is a progressive value, which is positive or negative. And there's the engineering of the identity of positive, which English is all about. Jesus Christ, when he says he's the Alpha and the Omega, he's saying these are polarity nature of one body of value, of nature. As everything is in demonstration. It's not. It should be Alpha and Omega on the battery. Because it's not one's positive or one's negative. Inherent to all physical matter, all finite values, even gaseous ones, is a portion of the complete identity of space that won't mix with temporary space nature, but through the complete identity, which has three portions, because it has one portion made from it that won't, and one portion that enables this, and they're expanding together, the Trinity. They're expanding together as the complete nature, but only as three natures coming together as the complete nature, more and more, because from our perspective, as a perfect progression, as a value of the complete identity of space, which was with an inherent volume in nature that will never come. It will just keep gaining value through temporary space nature. And Earth is the phenomenon of being closest to this. But it's also, there's a volume of it mixed with the active and the progressive. So the more that we deny it's the value in the progression that stays perfect parallel with it, the phenomenon of forever nature made through active life, and then as progressive forever nature, this is where heaven and hell came from. Because we are a quality of diffusion in relationship to and as nature of positive, identity of value, as an identity. Positive is an identity of value. The predicate is always positive in relationship to itself, as a progressive value. The predicate act is always negative relationship to it. It makes criminal insidiousness nature. See, modern nations are criminal insidiousness nature, victim predators. raised as naive reactions to theater kept to areas through facilitated, juxtaposed, formal, private, and formal interbranch juxtaposed, working together and through maintained through areas federal crimes that are verbal, live progression cover-ups, what keeps investigations standardized to all areas, natures of crime, victim predators manifest in conjunction with like the facades of businesses, infrastructure across the nations, means to nature. So in other words, not only we have to counter how we don't have one modern nation capable of defending one science, and our founders explaining their recorded forced theater insidiously, pretended not realized by the people who know the most knowledge about American history. Simple correlation they're messing up. James Marbury versus Madison is tied to how James Madison was the founder with the plan that forced and tricked everyone to fight for revolution from a position where everyone was fact, treatment, nature slaves, forced to roles. Couldn't even talk. They even found out that everyone's fear. This is what manifests a lot of this. See, because the nations agree to be knaves, only realized in relationship to all these agreements and fact treatments, convictions towards that, forced on everything else. So in other words, there's no free speech. And then what's going to hide that? It needs to say things like pretend it's about value. There's no jobs for kids in Harvard, and it should be it's like worse than criminal incompetence with what they say made slavery, right through the schools, without telling about our founders' fact treatment nature slavery, without telling about how that was in the North, how it was internation entrenched here before our founders' births. So they call us the Great Satan in other countries. And that's multi-front. That's because they don't understand that our bombs and stuff like that are in the control. All this is locked in with agreements with hundreds of nations that were colonized here before our founders' births, to our founders' fact treatment nature slavery. So we're in a negative value nature progression, each modern nation, because we're not going by space nature system, which is the ancient snow people are shown. So even if every modern nation agrees to be to a pseudo unity, right to left is always the omega, the greater. That will be demonstrated by space nature system, negative value nature progressions, negative value natures, which criminal sees as nature, predicate acts, physical insidious acts, fact treatment nature effects, maintained in relationship to the database with colonization, before colonization, and as the value of colonization, as the value of each modern nation, came a database, organized crime, reaction as pseudo-sophistication only they realized through interscience areas maintained, now online maintained motivated, fact treatment, and database illusion stacking, multi-front illusions, method leaving everyone awes, each age of fact treatment nature, suit and tie collusion with other nations counter themselves not understanding. The Quran warns. The Quran describes the nature of how it wants itself to be presented in sequence before any of the debatable parts of the Quran. And it gives the obligation of a Muslim to point out which not positive, what they don't think is positive always. In other words, their identity of our nature onto itself. because the identity of space is bigger than itself. It has, and it's, no, in other words, these religions are working together. Only the geographical differences, and those geographical differences aren't being countered. They're playing war games with value, nature, system, tactical, let, entertained, even justified. So they can't do that and speak for us at the same time. That's not the nature of the law. They can't make its words. You see, that's what the Native Americans don't know how to. That's exactly what they want and need. Everyone does, because space's system only demonstrates negative value nature progressions, especially for people who stack. In other words, even if without even making more space, if we all go in like just special where people stacking, and with especially you have like oceans right on top of ocean where you could do things, make people have, you have to counter what we were left in a trap by this organized crime method. We have to treat it as an organized crime method. Colonization as a contained weapon, as a concept, as a fact treatment rack and roll, because it was worse than colonization. It was internation to keep everyone invested as predatory sophistication nature, knowing that they were going to be lie, progression, cover-up natures in relationship to databases. Natures, needing to hide their actual nature, because they understood that we were fact treatment nature, revelations. The campus Marcius, before it was criminally re-engineered. The value of that campus as a nature, as value, because value has a value nature relationship to itself, in relationship to the value of the progression onto itself, which will only stay positive, of a nature as the identity of space that stays perfect parallel with the value of and with the existence of temporary positive, which is the phenomena of having evolved here longer, but now, see, the rest of overall nature will never have criminal persuasions, because this system stays perfectly in demonstration to us always. Too long, this little one species depleted the value of Earth, as it's with difference, so we can see what is the identity shared. That's why we have individuals, groups, and their sexes to each person, and species body value, and then that further in correlation. The same reason we have the 3 area, state, nation sciences, and then that further in correlation with what's beyond our control. Because there's an identity of value coming through temporary space nature that has nothing to do with the value nature systems plural that we were forced to, as one shared, sick as fact treatment nature to justify it as Oz, victim predator roles. This took us right into World War with what was there, taking them into it. And what was forced the French into it, were forced George Washington had to leave slavery right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War in Wethersfield, Connecticut, in Hartford, Connecticut, where Trinity College is. Had to leave that there, right there, internation entrenched, right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. We had to counter-extort them with the French generals' help. But they were extorted by this too. The campus Marcius was criminally re-engineered. Santa Claus, St. Nicholas. They put him in prison. They put innocent people in prison. Everyone, they have people that were only victims, like hurt kids and stuff like that, didn't have prison in a sick place. For the people running it though, because they're covering up lie progressions as victims of victim predators of what is keeping investigations, to keep investigators and international police in collusion with the Nazi reactions, keeping wars and keeping differences between nations like that, keeping, like with terrorism and things like that, to keep those naive justifications and to keep means to exploit them, because even though they're more sophisticated than us, a whole bunch of ways with the technology and stuff like that, but to not let regular citizens be able to actually record it. Because they're stacking other in relationship to how they have. Even the media told to pretend, not to realize that they do, that they tell about things like Russian spy dens and stuff like that. These are fake sides, exploiting Russians and exploiting Americans, exploiting North Korea and South Korea, because every nation was forced to this facades, unfree, fact-cheating nature. So science, unfree science, worse than unfree, in relationship databases. Everyone, victim predators too. This is what forgiveness was for this. Also with the religions in the hands of what was his inter-investigator, Homeland and other juxtaposed knaves, and reactions to areas maintained, online maintained, motivated, internation, collusions with rackets against each stage of fact-treatment nature to keep that facilitated, recorded, set up, and methodically exploited, not let reported. This is why we have problems with like child predators and stuff like that with our nations. We have Asian families over here, victims and tools they don't even understand, pseudo-sophistication. Then you try to explain, they're forcing communications between people that wasn't had, pretended. Then you have to describe that. And then these are the people that are with courts, pretending that people are prejudiced or whatever like that, totally making up informations through time, effectively using KKK themed and Confederate flag themed rape threats, crime methods with kids forced sustained through them, using houses with drug cliques, near churches and schools, connected to themselves, connected to the college to placements and policings with on and off campuses, rackets, and crime methods with the on and off campus, where victim predator courts and their police and people that are associated with them, undercovers and all that, cultivated to federal crimes with evidences. And then they have to go back and repeat it. When they have to go back again, then they can't go back and show what was actually happening, because they're making people only know each other. In other words, they're starting fights they're directing strangers to make confessions and to make fake sides with issues, and they're not allowing paper treatments of the rules through time, through investigators too, at the same time, database illusion stacking against whole age groups. And then having them exploit that, and then keeping it at sensible, where everyone's, in other words, they're not showing the actually recorded. They're stacking databases with illusions and with people's minds, with conversations with investigators that are hiding their roles, maintain the originally state progressed, self-cultivated roles with the propagated breaching organized crime method, criminal international persuasions. So how you see this is through the sequence shift database crimes, interbranch and collusion and recorded crime methods with that, and how they're making evidence mistakes, but no one can see that because no one really sees each other, and they see that, and that's what's being exploited. Like they have the news fake both sides of the news, and then they measure how to further keep us breached. Because while they're faking both sides of the news, they're also recording, attaching those same people to fake conversations, to hide child predators, proven. But there's more recorded and confessed, so they won't. So they keep. They're keeping those fake stories proven up till both sides of the stories to cover lie progressions, regardless of it, what damages it does, and that it was his with using child predators, because they're covering also Trade Center crime rolls, which were shared by the nations there, each one through it, worse than criminally incompetent, and tied to value treatments where it's most critical, especially with our urban schools, and with treatments of color, uncharged, with the racket, not that I understood, with the fact treatment racket, with the black and white, and they did this with the Native Americans too. They did this with white people. They did this with our founders with fact treatment, that you're slaves.